In this video, we'll be looking at economic activity and the idea of choices in economics. This video is going to cover some basic economic concepts, such as the economic problem, costs and benefits of economic choices, opportunity costs, the idea of needs and wants, and economic activity. Economics is based on resolving what is known as the economic problem. But what is the economic problem? Well, to understand this, we have to know that humans have needs and wants. Basic needs of humans include food, water, and shelter. Consuming these things is vital for survival. But humans also have wants. These may not be necessary for survival, but they are things we like to own and consume. It's human nature to consume more and more of these goods and services, such as new clothes, holidays, and smartphones. Arguably, some of these wants can never be satiated. People will always want the newest model of iPhone when it comes out. However, the main issue with this is that there are finite resources on Earth in order to fulfill these wants. For example, there is a finite stock of gold which we can use to make jewelry or use in electrical circuits. There is a finite area of land on which we can grow crops. There's a finite supply of non-renewable resources, just coal, oil, and natural gas, that we can use to supply the energy we need to power production processes. In other words, these goods are limited, they're scarce. Putting the two sides together, the fact that we have unlimited needs and wants, but only limited resources with which we can fulfill those needs and wants, leads to the idea of scarcity. But the fact that we have limited resources means that we have to decide how to allocate those resources to specific uses. In that sense, economics is the study of choice. It studies what choices and decisions people make to overcome the issue of scarcity. But what kind of decisions do people make? Well, this is where the three fundamental economic questions come in: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. The question of what to produce concerns itself with what we're going to use the limited resources we have to produce. What are the limited resources we have going to be produced into? How to produce looks at how this production is going to happen. For example, what production processes are we going to use to turn the limited resources we have into the goods that we have decided to produce from the first question? And lastly, for whom to produce. In order to increase consumer welfare or consumer happiness, we have to determine who gets the goods and services we produce. Who decides the distribution of goods and services? Is it going to be a market that determines who gets goods and services through the market forces of supply and demand? Or is it going to be a central government entity that dictates who gets what? These are all key questions that any society has to ask itself when it looks to trying to resolve the issue of scarcity. Now let's look at some of the costs and benefits of economic decisions. Every economic decision, such as deciding what to produce, how to produce, or for whom to produce, has costs and benefits. For example, if a firm decides to specialize in creating software, then there are what we call explicit costs to that decision. These are simply the costs of the resources that need to be put in order to create that software. These costs could include the cost of labor, such as the programmers, or the costs of other inputs, such as maintenance of the computers and the office building. But despite the costs, the firm decides to continue with producing software, and this is because these explicit costs are justified by the potential benefits of producing software, such as the profit the firm receives at the end. But looking at just explicit costs doesn't factor in the entire economic cost of an economic decision. Alongside explicit costs, there's also a specific implicit cost in making economic decisions, and this is called opportunity cost. The idea of opportunity costs is an important one in economics, and it links to the first key economic question: what to produce. As I said before, the economic problem is about how societies allocate scarce resources amongst alternative uses. So when it comes to deciding what to produce, societies are spoilt for choice. There are millions of goods and ideas individuals, firms, and governments can dedicate resources to. But there's a cost to this. For example, if a firm decides to produce cars, then it may not have the time or money available to also produce tractors or buses or trains. By producing one set of goods, the firm gives up the opportunity of producing other goods. Choosing to produce trains instead may have brought profits as well, and this is the firm's opportunity cost in making that decision to produce cars. The textbook definition of opportunity cost is that it is, in decision making, the value of the next best alternative foregone. That may seem a bit complicated, but it's just another way of explaining the same core issue in our example. The firm has to make a decision on which goods it should produce. By choosing just to build cars, it forgoes the opportunity to build something else. One main assumption we often make is that the main objective of firms is to maximize profit. Obviously, this isn't true in all cases, as some firms have corporate social responsibility objectives too. But if we take this assumption of profit maximization to be true, then we can deduce that producing cars brings the most profit for the firm. Otherwise, why would the firm be producing cars if it could produce trains with a greater profit margin? Therefore, this idea of opportunity cost is very important for firms that want to profit maximize. These firms always have to think about what they are giving up when they decide to produce a certain line of goods and services. Going back to our example, let's say that producing buses would have brought the next highest levels of profit for the firm. This is the next best alternative for the firm, as if it couldn't be producing cars, it would be making the most profit by producing buses. Looking back to our definition of opportunity cost, in decision making the value of the next best alternative foregone, we can tell therefore that the opportunity cost of the car firm is the profit that it could have got if it produced buses instead. However, there were some pretty basic assumptions there, many of which don't apply in all cases. One of these is that not all alternatives may be known. In real life, economic agents don't have perfect information on alternatives, or even the potential benefit that each of these alternatives could bring. So in the real world, people may not make decisions that maximize their welfare. They may take the next best alternative, completely unaware of the fact that there were other goods and services that they could have produced or consumed that would have made them better off. Another issue is factor immobility. It's all well and good thinking that the firm we mentioned earlier could decide to produce tractors or cars or trains. But in reality, this may not be possible given the resources the firm already has. If the firm originally decides to build cars, and subsequently builds an entire car production plant, then it can't immediately switch to producing buses or tractors. You may need to change the machinery, for example. If suddenly growing fruit is more profitable, then the whole car production plant is useless. You can't use a car production plant to grow fruit. This means that in many cases, factors of production are immobile. They can't be easily moved from production in one sector to another. And this may hinder changing production in accordance with the concepts of opportunity cost and utility maximization. On a related note, economic activity refers to the combination of resources, more specifically factors of production, to create outputs that people can consume. Economic activity is carried out in order to satisfy some of those needs and wants humans have. That's the main purpose of economic activity, increasing utility or happiness or welfare through the satisfaction of needs and wants. There are two types of economic activity: production and consumption. Production refers to the process of actually combining those factors of production to produce both finished and unfinished goods. Unfinished goods are simply components that are assembled to make finished goods, and the finished goods at the end can then be consumed. Consumption is the other half of economic activity. In order for happiness to increase, in order for economic activity to happen at all, people have to demand these goods and services. That's why consumption is an integral part of economic activity, alongside production. Within an economy, there are three main groups of agents: producers, consumers, and government. There are many links between these groups, and we'll be going through each of them now. Consumers can mean individuals or households, and they contribute to businesses by both providing labor to businesses to aid the production process, and also by spending on goods and services produced by businesses. In return, businesses provide these goods and services, and they also provide the wages to the workers that end up working for these firms. Consumers also contribute to government revenue through taxes such as VAT or income tax. In return, the government provides public services such as policing. Some governments also have social safety nets, such as the benefit system in the UK. Lastly, businesses contribute to the government through corporate taxes on company profits. In return, the government influences businesses by providing public services, regulation, and sometimes subsidies to these businesses. We've reached the end of the video now. Here's a news article relating to this topic. Morrison's supermarket chain takes on thousands of new staff. Thank you very much for listening.